In May 1974, 27-year-old Eugen Grigore was a truck driver working under the harsh conditions of the communist regime. He worked 14 hours a day, 6 days a week, all to support his housewife, who cared for their 3 children, and who were at home in the Kopu neighborhood of Yasi. One day, upon arriving at the truck depot, he was summoned to the director's office and given devastating news. The director informed him that his house had caught fire and that his family had perished in the blaze. A group of gypsy women and children from a nomadic camp near Yashi roamed the city streets, scavenging for scrap metal, bottles, and other items they could sell. Believing that the Grigore house was vacant, they broke in to steal from the yard. When Eugene's wife heard the commotion and tried to drive them away, the gypsies, in a panicked and foolish attempt to avoid getting caught, locked her and the children inside the house and set it on fire to cover their tracks and prevent anyone from alerting the authorities. The agonized screams of the Grigore family alerted the neighbors, who saw the gypsies fleeing but arrived too late to save them. Eugene returned home to find everything he cherished engulfed in flames. Around him, neighbors whispered in hushed tones about the unfolding tragedy, yet none dared to speak to the militia, paralyzed by the fear of gypsy retaliation. He was unable to react. The flames had not only consumed his family and home, but also devoured his soul. As the days went by, the militia stalled the investigation, unwilling to venture into the gypsy camp. Their excuse was the lack of witnesses, and they hoped the case would fade into obscurity as an unsolved matter. Weeks passed with Eugene's neighbors being threatened into silence. Out of fear for their own safety, they were coerced into keeping quiet about the tragedy. As the months dragged on, Eugene's pleas for justice faced mounting resistance and intimidation from both the authorities and the gypsies. His frustration deepened, and each threat from the gypsies only fueled his rage. He remained a broken man, his anger growing more intense with every threat and each act of suppression. Hatred took root in his heart as he watched his family's death being ignored, their memory fading from public consciousness as quickly as the flames that had consumed them. One day, while driving his truck and reaching the peak of his despair, Eugene reached under the driver's seat and retrieved a bottle of cognac. At that moment, something began to shift within him. Overcome by profound rage and hopelessness, and fueled by the belief that his family would receive no justice, he began drinking heavily. As the cognac took effect, his judgment grew increasingly clouded. Consumed by a volatile mix of intoxication and unrelenting fury, he steered his truck toward the Chiria district of Yash, on the city's outskirts, where the gypsies had settled. His actions, now driven by a maelstrom of grief and vengeance, soon spiraled into a catastrophic and tragic rampage. They lived in tents and traveled in horse-drawn carts. Their peace was shattered when Eugen Grigore plowed into their makeshift settlement. Driven by rage and alcohol, Eugene drove over tents, women, children, the elderly, and men, crushing everything in his path until nothing was left standing. 24 people met their end beneath the heavy wheels of his truck, and another 50 were injured. Surrounded by agonizing cries of pain, he was found in his truck, waiting to be arrested by the militia. He had driven over everything in his path without mercy, carts, horses, tents, and humans alike. He did not stop until everything was utterly destroyed. With nothing left to return to and his family gone, a part of him had died with them that day. What remained was a man consumed by madness, pushed to the edge by societal neglect and injustice. In his final act of retribution, he took the law into his own hands, wreaking havoc with a chilling lack of empathy. He was sentenced to life in prison, but by then he seemed indifferent to the prospect of his own future. Eugene's life had come to a halt the moment his family was taken from him. The prison walls, while confining him physically, could not imprison the profound emptiness he felt. For him, true life had ended with the loss of his loved ones, and his remaining days were merely an extension of the relentless void that had consumed him. The surviving gypsies from the massacre were relocated to the outskirts of Bodosani, far from the scene of the horrific events that had shattered their lives. This relocation aimed to distance them from the memory of the tragedy and prevent further tensions. The case was completely covered up by the militia. Eugene later revealed, "I killed 24 people, men, women, and children." The entire incident was swiftly classified as top secret by the militia, who sought to prevent any conflict between the Gypsies and Romanians. As a result, Romania remained largely unaware of the tragedy, and the memory of Eugene's family quickly faded from public consciousness as everyone sought to forget the massacre. Even today, many details remain classified, and much about the case is still shrouded in mystery. During the Communist era, the press was strictly prohibited from reporting on the incident, as the Communist Party aimed to prevent further hatred from escalating between Romanians and Gypsies. Little is known about his time in prison. He was moved from one facility to another for reasons that remain unclear. This secrecy was in line with the communist regime's practices, which aimed to tightly control such matters to avoid public scrutiny and prevent unrest. Transferring prisoners was a common tactic to isolate them and prevent the rise of any support or sympathy. During this period, the regime was extremely sensitive to any actions that could incite conflict or dissent, and managing high-profile cases like Eugene's was a key part of their strategy. Consequently, the full details of his imprisonment and its conditions remain largely concealed from the public. In 1989, Romania experienced a revolution that brought profound changes for everyone, including Eugen Grigore. The communist regime was overthrown, and President Nicolae Ceausescu, along with his wife Elena, was executed for treason. This pivotal moment not only ended a long era of repression and terror, but also ushered in a new chapter in Romania's history. By 1990, 2 years later, the authorities revisited Eugene's case, resulting in a reduction of his sentence to 28 years. It was only with the regime change that the authorities recognized Eugene's severe mental deterioration, a tragic outcome that had been evident since the day his family was lost in the flames. In 1995, at the age of 48, Eugen was admitted to the psychiatric hospital in Botoșani. Ironically, this was the same city on the outskirts of which the surviving Gypsies from the 1974 tragedy had been resettled. As the case began to be declassified, it drew increasing public interest, catapulting Eugen into the spotlight. His notoriety surged to new heights when he was controversially celebrated as a figure of heroism by supporters of Steaua Bucharest during a high-profile match against Rapid Bucharest. This intense rivalry was further fueled by derogatory remarks and stereotypes, with Rapid Bucharest fans and players often targeted with offensive labels, intensifying the social and ethnic tensions that the communist regime had sought to suppress. Eugene's story came to symbolize the deep-seated divisions and resentments within Romanian society, mirroring the nation's struggle to come to terms with its past and the remnants of its communist era. The case sparked widespread debate over justice, revenge, and the repercussions of political and social upheaval on individual lives, becoming a focal point of public discourse and media attention. In 2001, Eugen was discharged from the hospital, but he found himself completely alone, with no family or belongings. His newfound freedom only deepened his despair, forcing him to seek refuge in the sewers of Iași. As he roamed the city as a vagrant, he caught the attention and sympathy of students from the Institute of Agronomy. These students, moved by his plight, offered him food, water, and cigarettes, providing a small measure of relief in his otherwise harsh existence. Eugen had become a local legend, an unofficial leader among the homeless, and for a while his circumstances seemed to improve. However, on March 12, 2002, the police in Iași conducted a sweeping raid in the sewers, targeting the homeless population as part of a broader campaign to clean up the city. This crackdown aimed to forcibly remove the vagrants and restore order to the streets. The operation resulted in numerous arrests and displacements, thrusting Eugen and many others back into a state of uncertainty and hardship. This harsh intervention underscored the persistent struggle between urban renewal efforts and the harsh realities of social inequality, illustrating the ongoing conflict between maintaining public order and addressing the deep-seated issues of poverty and marginalization. In 2002, immediately following the police raid, Eugen disappeared without a trace, leaving behind a shroud of mystery. His sudden vanishing led to widespread speculation. Some believed he might have taken his own life, burdened by the weight of his past, while others thought he may have died of natural causes by 2004. Despite the various theories and rumors, the true fate of Eugen remained unknown, and he faded from public view. His disappearance only deepened the enigma surrounding his life, leaving those who once knew him to ponder the unresolved end of a troubled and tragic figure. However, Eugen did not take his own life. Instead, he moved to a quieter town named Romania, located about 40 kilometers from Iași. In this small, relatively isolated community, the sparse police presence meant he was largely left alone. Though Eugen managed to live under the radar, he struggled with the shadows of his past. On July 23, 2009, at the age of 62, Eugen found himself across from the train station where he approached a taxi driver waiting for a fare. He asked the driver for a cigarette, but the request quickly turned into a heated argument. As their argument heated up, Eugen tried to distance himself from the taxi driver. Distracted and still shouting over his shoulder, he stepped into the street, not paying attention to the traffic. In his anger, he was unaware of the danger as he attempted to cross to the train station. It was at that moment, just as he reached the middle of the road, that a truck hit him, pulling him under its wheels. The impact was sudden and brutal, giving him no chance to escape. Witnesses nearby watched in horror as the tragic scene unfolded, the noise of the collision echoing through the street. In a bitter twist of fate, Eugen Grigore, who had once caused devastation with his own truck, met his end under the wheels of another. His life, marked by loss, rage, and regret, came to a sudden and tragic close. This is the last photo ever taken of him. Thanks for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed the content, please hit the like and subscribe buttons. They're free and really help me out. Have an amazing day and stay safe.